Hello. Hi, Claire. Thank you
Hi.
so much for joining us. And I just said when we just came on, I was like, oh my goodness, your background. That is amazing. So yeah,
Well,
hello.
my background is actually a
Yeah.
very old painting that I did, I think, in the year 2000. So, oh my goodness, 25 years ago now. Um,
Wow.
and really, it's funny because this piece that I did, there's lots of little elements of what I do now that are still that I can recognize in that painting from 25 years ago. You can't see from the bit that you can see, it's actually quite a big painting, but this is
Mm,
actually two canvases that got chopped up and stitched back together. And they've
really?
got a lot, one part of it has got a lot of stitching on, and I think that little sort of little interest in textiles, although I don't have a textiles background at all.
Mm,
I come from a sort of painting. I mean, I did a fine art degree and came from a painting
yeah.
background.
And
Uh,
I kind of did some because I've invited you to speak to us because I've always loved your work on
Thank you.
Instagram. I just always seen that. And it was really interesting when I was kind of looking back, I saw that you did, your
Mm,
roots are in painting, and
mm,
then you come, and I love that cross discipline. So we're recording this because I saw your plaster pieces
mm.
and I'm just about to do a texture prompt in No Rules Textile Society. So really wanted to speak to you about that. But yeah, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can kind of talk about plaster and the move
Yes.
from painting to
Yeah.
textiles, the
Okay.
mix in because it's fascinating and there's loads of things I want to talk to you about. And
Well,
I'm
it
so
is, and I
happy.
think, the first thing is that I don't really think that I fit into any category. Sometimes we feel that we have to say I'm a painter or I'm a textile artist,
Oh,
and I just
definitely.
feel like I've always borrowed little bits from all of the disciplines and kind of put those together. So, I did a degree in fine art, and quite a long time ago now, and most of that was painting. And I think I wanted to be a painter. That's what I thought. But I always added things into the surface. There was always a collage element, or like I said, cutting things up and putting them back together. I always felt a little bit restricted by the frame of the canvas and having to work on that size. Collage, what I'm realizing more and more, is my go-to.
Mm.
Um,
That's kind of
but
the center of it all
I
almost.
think so. That idea of being able to cut and join and rejoin and layer, and I think that's the kind of thread that's run through all of my work. So alongside, I did my degree, and then I also did a teacher training. So I've been very involved in teaching for the last 20 years, and I've been head of art in a department in Somerset. And that's been brilliant. I absolutely love teaching, and it's brought masses to my work.
Mm.
It's really a very two-way process.
Yeah.
And I think in recent years, I've been teaching GCSE textiles, and I think that has really helped me
Thanks.
with bringing some of the textile skills into my own work.
Mm.
And now I'm at a point where I'm stepping away from the classroom teaching, which is really exciting. This is my last year of classroom teaching, and going to be focusing much more on my own work and teaching workshops and seeing where it goes. New opportunities, new path.
I think that's what I kind of saw in your work. It felt like you were painting with textiles
Okay, that's
in a
interesting.
way,
Yeah.
like the way that you put colors together. And I guess it is just, it's a medium, like paint's a medium, you can just use all those skills, but just transfer it to
Yes,
sort of that or mix it in with that.
and I love color. I mean, I
Mm.
really love color, and I love surface. And I think, actually, when you're painting on a canvas, you're painting on a piece of fabric. So
I
actually,
always
what
say
I
that too.
realized was that if I didn't paint on a stretcher, if I just
Hmm.
painted on a piece of fabric, then I could actually put that through the sewing machine. And so a lot of the work that you'll see on my Instagram from sort of 3 years, 4 years back was that I was painting and then layering and putting it through the machine, and then introducing bits of other fabrics, organza, and printing onto organza and layering it in, and yeah. I
Wonderful.
love all those things, but it
But I
has gone in a very different direction in the
So
last.
how did that happen? How did the
Well,
plaster happen?
okay, I'll
Because
tell you.
I'll tell you, Claire, in No Rules, I go back a long way. So in 1993, 92, I created a collection of dresses when I did my multimedia textiles at Loughborough. And
Mm.
I dipped a lot of these lace dresses in plaster to create
Okay,
this kind of texture. And I've always loved it. And No Rules allows me to go back to things that I
yeah.
experimented with and like push it again.
Mm.
And I was kind of looking at that for this texture prompt, and I kind of just looked at yours and went,
Okay, plaster.
tell me, plaster.
Well, it has been a completely experimental process for me. I have no background in using any sculptural materials at all. And the other thing I think to say in the beginning is that I had no intention whatsoever of using plaster. It just sort of happened. So I started, so it was when 2 years ago when I got long COVID. And so having a lot of fatigue really changed how I could work. I couldn't work for long periods of time. I wanted to keep working because I thought it would be really good for my recovery, but it needed to be very small and things that felt very easy, no pressure. So I went back to collage because that's my go-to. And as I've said, I'd always worked with a lot of color, but at this point, I didn't feel like I wanted to make work that was quite so loud. I needed, everything was about calming, quiet. And so I started making just these little collage, really simple, small collage pieces like this.
Yeah.
And the idea with these was that I was sort of pushing the color to the edges.
Yeah.
Still a little bit of color, but it was coming through on sides.
They're alive, Claire.
They are. They're telling me the story. So,
Yeah.
um, and so what happened was I was just making these, and I started just piling them up on my desk. And one day I looked at them, and I just had this pile like this. And I just thought, oh, actually, you know what? They're more interesting from the side than
Mm.
they are from the top. And I'm kind of liking how this makes this little block, this little stack. And that was the start. I took this little stack out to the studio and I had a few little bits of wood and a little bit of perspex. And I just started sort of playing and stacking them. And I thought, I don't know, quite like
Yeah.
this. Um,
Oh, I love this
what can
flow of
I do?
ideas. You start with no, I mean, we're always saying that you start
Yeah,
with it when you stop thinking about the end product and just let it
I
flow.
totally, yes, absolutely. And
Oh,
this had to be about that. There was no,
mm,
I didn't have any energy to think about an
mm,
outcome. I didn't want to make anything. I just wanted to
yeah,
play
okay,
um, for the process, for
yeah.
the act of just making, really. So I said to my husband, have we got any, cement or plaster or anything like that out in the
Something to kind of glue
garage?
it together.
And we made this little sort of makeshift wooden mold that had like sort of a grid of 8 little squares this size. And he mixed up some cement, and I sort of dropped a few bits of fabric into them and poured
Yeah.
in this stuff, and that was it. And then they were very rough and ready, but
Uh-huh.
enough, I could see enough that something was there. So then I thought, okay, what can I use? Plaster, I can manage that. And I bought some plaster. And as I was also sort of looking a little bit at resin. And then I found these little resin molds,
Okay.
silicon molds that were like exactly the same size as this. So
I
I
love
bought
that.
them.
But
And
like
then I
in a
just,
cook shop or something. Is
no,
that
on Amazon.
yeah. Love it.
I think there may be like resin molds for people that make like coasters
Oh,
and things like
I
that.
know. Yeah.
So they're just made out of silicone. So and then I just started playing, and I just started putting little bits of anything, textiles and bits of wool and things into them. And in the beginning, it was all a bit hit and miss, and it was very experimental. And what I very quickly discovered was that if I put um, the plaster in too quickly, it just subsumed everything, and
Okay.
all the threads just disappeared inside the block. And if I let the plaster thicken a little bit, then when I put it into the mold, it didn't fill all the spaces, and then I would have these little bits of texture showing through. So shall I show you a
Which
few
is the
examples?
most incredible contrast, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was the thing. I think when I first took the plaster block out, what I absolutely loved was how completely smooth and perfect that
Yeah.
surface felt.
That contrast,
And
that
then that contrasted with all the bits of texture, and I really loved that. And also the kind of the contrast of the sort of strength with fragility as well, that whole kind of.
yeah, we've just
So,
done our current prompt is well, our last prompt, by the time this goes out, was
hmm.
differences. And it's
Okay,
so
so that's,
important in work, isn't it? You
yeah,
know, to kind of find those and like embrace those
yeah,
differences. Because
yeah,
it's, yeah, love it.
absolutely. So, um, a few of my early pieces. So this was one where I just put some organza inside, and can you see it? Obviously, that was so when I poured it in, the organza was in the bottom of the mold, and I poured in the.
And you don't have any control,
No,
really.
you don't. So you don't know what you're going to get. So that's quite
Yeah,
exciting.
that's really exciting.
Um, and but it's also, it means that yes, you don't have a lot of control, but through doing it over and over again, I started to gain more control. Um,
Yeah. But you're
and
also trusting the process,
yeah,
which you kind of did in the first instance to get your first pieces. So you're kind of like,
absolutely.
okay, where is it going to take
Yeah.
me?
And then, so here's a piece that where I put the fabric in, but then when I took it out, I couldn't really see any of the fabric. It had all disappeared. So then
Yeah.
I started saying, well, okay, what can I do? Oh, let's get a hammer. Let's see what happens if I break the block open. And then that was really interesting.
Is this because you're sort of doing this in the shed and you're like, well, there's a hammer. Let's use
Yeah.
these different
So,
tools.
so
Love
on
that.
some of them, I actually then started to sort of embrace that,
Yeah.
where the
Oh, wow. And you've got that chiffon coming out.
yeah, where the bits were sort of coming out,
Mm.
um, and playing with that idea. And I made some. What else did I put in? So I made some slightly bigger blocks. This one has got, this is jelly printed, um, sort of tissue paper,
Yeah.
which I shoved. This was like obviously a cube mold, and I sort of shoved this in and then poured the
Wow.
plaster in. And that's created some really, and I love this because it's given me a sort of quite painterly kind of
Yes,
mark
absolutely.
within the
It's kind of
plaster.
really magical as well because, like, I often talk about ceramics with textiles, but you can't fire that because the textiles would kind of almost burn out, wouldn't it? And
Yes,
this looks like that, but it's preserved.
yes, yes. So yeah, so then it was really, I started chopping up bits of old pieces of work.
Now, I love this as well, Claire, because I was thinking about this last night when I was looking at your work. And I always say, this is again, if your work goes wrong, don't worry about it. Put it to one side. Another technique will come along where you can like roller
Yeah,
over it or put it in plaster.
exactly. Yeah.
Suddenly it's got a new life.
Nothing's
Don't
wasted.
despair if
Yeah.
things like don't quite work out or you're like, I don't love that. I have this suitcase full of things that I don't love. And
Yes.
when I get a new technique, the suitcase comes out and I'm like, right, which ones shall I play with?
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think nothing's ever wasted.
Mm.
And you can always recycle things. And I'm the same. I've just got piles of rejected bits.
Mm.
And every now and again, I think that's what collage, working with collage really gives you that kind of way of thinking, because you know that everything can get used in some way or another. And layering is so brilliant for that. So this was one where I just cut up a piece of work and put it in, and then I also experimented with sort of some bigger bits of
Oh,
this cut
wow.
up. So this is sort of quite, again, rough and ready, this one, but this was just experimenting, so you can see
Yeah.
the piece
So
that I.
that's the sample
Yes, so I
wrapped
sort of,
inside of the
within the
mold.
cube, I created it in a sort of curved form, and then poured my plaster in. So the plaster, it sort of stopped, um,
Mm.
yeah, on that side. No plaster sort of went into that bit.
Yeah.
Um, so, at this point, I was really just playing. I didn't have
I
any
can imagine the
outline.
kind of whooping as you pulled these things
Oh,
out, going like delight.
it was great. And the moment of sort of pushing it out of the
Mm,
mold and seeing what it had given, it was like a little treat every time, really.
totally. I
or,
always
or
feel
a
like that with,
disappointment when there was
yeah,
nothing to see, and then I had to kind of,
no, that's true.
you
But I
know,
always love that. That's the textile techniques that I love. I love water soluble fabric. When you wash it out, it's just always a delight. It's,
yeah.
yeah,
And I think also for me with these blocks, what I was really interested in was what you could see on the sides, because that related back to my initial collage, this idea of the color. And so in my pieces that I've put together, so these are the ones, I'll show you one of the ones. So this is one of the pieces that you will have seen
yes.
on
Oh,
Instagram recently, where I've actually
the
started
sun is really, it's really
to
shining.
bring these. Can you see
Worst
that
behavior.
okay?
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Lovely.
Yeah.
This
So
mohair.
I've
Wow.
yeah, that's got different, but
Mm.
I've really sort of wanted the edges of the plaster. So they're not going to have any frames. They're going to hang like this, so that you can see these little bits that are going on the edges. Um, and
Have you just glued them all together?
yeah, so they're all glued. So I've glued these ones together. And so here, this one. So I'm also using Perspex.
Oh,
Perspex is something I've used back through my work in different ways. And again, I really like the contrast between the very sort of matte, um, light absorbing sort of surface of the plaster, and then the sort of reflective qualities that you get
absolutely.
with the Perspex.
Well, it's playing on the
Um,
bits that you love, isn't it? It's noticing, like you keep saying, I notice that, so play on that and push that forward.
I think with the when you're engaging with the materials like this and playing with materials, you just have to allow the process to take over, really, and get in that kind of flow with the materials and listen to what the process is sort of telling you, in a way, rather than
Totally.
trying to dictate. I love, I've recently been reading some of Phila de Barlow's
Okay.
writing
Right.
about her process. And although she's a sculptor, so it's coming at things from perhaps a very different angle. How she talks about her process is really, really interesting, and that often she
Right.
would go into the studio without any clear intention, and
Mm.
she would just start combining materials, just that play, and see where that went.
Yeah.
And I've been, I think we can all get a bit hung up with the outcome, and I've
Yeah.
really made a very conscious effort to try to put that outcome to the side
Yeah.
and really think about just allowing myself time to play. And I've been playing with these blocks now for, a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I do have an exhibition coming up soon. And so I am having to now think about how can I resolve this and the outcome. But I think the outcomes will be stronger for the
Yeah.
fact that I've given myself this time to play, really.
It's where the extraordinary things happen
Yeah.
and the unique things happen and the things that are I think authentically you,
Mm.
because you allow it to sort of almost flow through you
Yeah,
without
it's
forcing anything.
it's where the
It makes
discovery
so
happens,
much
isn't it?
sense.
I think.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mm.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So,
Wow. I
uh,
love that. And I can, and I can see also, you were talking about your painting behind you.
mm.
It wouldn't look out of place almost with it still, would it? The
Well, there is.
colors and the
Yeah.
washes of white, and you're still doing you.
I think so. I think when I look at it, although it in some ways feels like a very big departure from what I was doing before,
Mm.
now as they're resolving, I can still make those connections back to what I was doing even, yeah, at this point all that time ago, which is really interesting, isn't it? I think
Yeah, totally.
how well that's when you're starting to recognize your voice, isn't it? See what it is that
Which
you
is
are.
always difficult, no matter how long you've been working to sort of find that. And I also think, as you've completely said, my glasses are so dirty. Um, it's kind of like unlearning what
Yes.
we've, a lot of the time, what we should do, you know, and just mixing it up, and it's okay. And
Yes.
using all the different materials and the paint and the plaster and the textiles, it doesn't matter. We don't
That's
have
it.
to put ourselves in a box.
No, exactly. And asking that. Sorry, I'm just looking out the window because it's suddenly hailing here. So you've got the sun, I've got the
Unveil.
hail. Yeah, I think it's about, like I think you said before, asking that question, what if? What if I put these two materials together? What will happen? The worst that will happen is that it will go wrong, and it will be another piece for you know, the folder that of things that you're keeping for something else. But
Exactly. But I love the way you play with them. I love the way there was one post where you'd stacked them and then you were like, well, I could stack them or I could put them this way. And it's kind of moving all the time.
yeah,
You could almost even, yeah, it's amazing to,
well, I think the stacking. I mean, that's where I started off, and I also started playing with stacking fabric. So
yeah.
I
Yes,
just
show us
started
more.
doing
Wonderful.
doing this and
Yeah.
putting the bits together and doing this, and I do still.
It's
Uh,
almost patchworking sculpture.
yeah, so it is. It just
I
it
mean, patchwork is collage in a way, isn't
well,
it?
it is,
And
and
it's
that's
all
what.
mixing.
And I think I've thought about it like that. The fact that I'm making through making all the blocks, I'm making my collage materials. Actually,
Yeah.
it's the same as if I was jelly printing a load of papers and then I bring those all together. Well, here I've made huge amounts of these blocks and then I'm collaging with them. And that is actually, I think, what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Um, and whether I'm collaging with them up to create a stack or in a flat way, then it is that process of being able to. I think that's what I like. I like to have lots of bits and parts, individual parts that I
Yeah.
can bring together. Then I feel like I have this control over the colors, over the textures, and that I
All
somehow
those,
lose when I'm working on one painting on a fixed frame. Um, I don't have that same freedom for me that I have
yeah.
when I'm working with all these multiple parts that I can bring together and assemble
And
and
it just
join.
doesn't feel as scary either to kind of like
Mm,
work on multiple parts and
mm,
then bring them all collectively
mm.
together
Yeah.
for an exhibition. So where is your exhibition going to be?
So my exhibition is going to be in Wellington, which is a small town in Somerset, and in a place where I've recently started teaching some adult workshops,
Okay, right.
and there's a very small gallery there.
Wonderful.
And so in at
I
the end
want
of
to come and see
May,
it.
at
It's
the end
not
of
too
May,
far for
no, at the
me.
end of May, I'm going to be having these pieces, these blocks, and there's also some other more. Well, they're kind of a cross between textiles and painting,
Uh-huh.
which I'm also working on, which will be
What's that going
appearing.
to be? Is that new things that you're working on?
No, it's kind of. it's sort of, I've started posting some of it on Instagram. So I've been working more with
Okay.
collage pieces like this, which I'm
Yes.
building up, and I'm going to layer with perspex,
Uh-huh.
um, and they're going to relate to the blocks
Yeah.
in a slightly more painterly way, perhaps.
Yeah. Just pushing it
Yeah,
slightly in different kind of
yeah.
directions, moving
But
it.
there'll be there's going to be a crossover in the colors and the layering and the use of the. So let me show you this one.
Yeah.
So this piece, which is another of the pieces I've put together.
Yeah.
So this top block here is completely made out of fabric. Can you see that on the wall?
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, in the sort of other pieces that I'm making that aren't going to have the plaster in, I'm going to play with this idea of the fabric in the on the sides. And also another discovery that I made through my teaching.
Yeah.
I recently did a jelly printing workshop,
Oh,
and I've been jelly printing for years,
yeah.
um, but mostly just to create papers that I then use in collage. And after, so I was doing a few samples for this workshop, and then I suddenly thought, what would happen if
What
I
if?
printed onto a plaster block?
Oh, wow.
And it was fantastic
Because
because,
plaster is so absorbent to paint,
yeah, so it
like
just
watercolor
soaked
paper.
up. It
Oh,
just soaked up the acrylic really nicely. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. That's another way of um, putting. So that one I just showed you. Um, so that block there,
uh-huh.
that's jelly printed.
Love that.
Um,
So
and
it's just, and it's such a fast way to get color onto things. I
yeah,
mean, in a way, plaster is such a fast way to kind of
yeah,
make this sculpture, isn't it? I mean, it's
yeah.
going to ask you how long some of these take to dry. Do they take a day?
Oh, days.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
days,
take
but
days.
still.
But obviously the process of making it, of putting the
Mm,
plaster in, of turning the block out is quite fast. So I can
yeah,
see what I'm getting quite quickly. But
yeah,
then I have to wait for it to dry out and become really white.
yeah,
Or I
yes,
can then really start to play with it.
yeah.
So this is another, that one's jelly printed. And this is an example, because I haven't talked about this, is where I've actually put lace. Not lace. I'll show you what it is. Well, I brought, when I was in a French market, I bought a lot of.
Yeah, I know what you
It
mean.
is.
Yeah, that kind of vintage.
Yes.
Yes.
It's beautiful. I mean, I know in a way I felt awful cutting it up. But
Oh, Claire, I'm
time,
constantly cutting this stuff.
at the same
It's
time,
giving it new
it's
life.
giving it a new life, and it was already in a market, a
Yeah.
second hand, and so it might have ended up having a worse future. Um,
I love
so
it.
so
I
yes,
love that
so
it's.
I've got lots of bits like this, that and that's then creates these kind of
Oh, that's beautiful.
effects. So
And
that
look at
is.
the way that the plaster is just like, oh, it's
So
just,
it just goes through little
yeah,
bits, but obviously, and
that's
it's
wonderful.
not a print. It's actually in there. The
Mm.
the
Oh,
bit of
the lace is in there.
it's
Yeah.
in there. Yeah, it's
You
still.
know, my mind went into this thing, you were saying about your kind of resin molds.
Yeah.
It'd be quite amazing if you could have molds that were see-through and you could somehow like look
Yeah.
under
See
the
what's.
table as you
Well,
were pouring it.
I do sometimes. I'm a bit impatient. I do like things to happen quite quickly. And so sometimes I'm trying to sort of pick it up while it's still a bit wet to see if
Yeah,
there's
see
anything
what's
there.
happening.
Is there anything visible, or have I ruined this one and sort of
Yeah.
poured too much plaster in too quickly? Um, but I know now that
So exciting.
even if I do that, I can bash it up. And look, I even tried this one's got a snail in it.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's
So
beautiful.
when I was in France in the summer, I
Yeah.
collected lots of snail shells that I found round and about when I was out walking. And so I thought I would try, but it didn't do quite what I had wanted
Oh,
with,
it's beautiful
but
though. And I saw you'd
still,
layered
I
that,
have,
hadn't you, with
yes,
some
into
fabric,
one
and
of my,
it's just, I
yes.
think it's magical. It's like
Um,
it's having an almost quite simple but experimental process and bringing in just saying what if in this context, which I think is really important as well, because sometimes we can just have so many ideas, we do nothing, so to kind of have a little bit of a constraint and then go wild within that.
Yeah. And
It,
I think sometimes, and I've discovered this really with this sort of long COVID journey, is that it's placed real restrictions on what I can do in my making. I can't make the sort of big gestural paintings that I was doing before because I don't have the energy, and I've had to adapt my making to working in smaller chunks of time. But actually, that's been, although in the beginning that felt really frustrating,
yeah, cool.
um, now I can see that that limitation has made me do things differently. And then when you do things differently, that's when something new happens.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, those restrictions, any restrictions by saying, well, we're just going to work with, 3 colors, or today I'm just going to work with these materials, or that it
It just opens up
can
a world of
be, yes,
possibility,
a
doesn't
really
it?
positive thing because,
That was kind of my idea behind prompts. Just
yeah,
let's explore texture for 6 weeks. And you
yeah,
kind of go down that rabbit hole, and it just, as you say, you'll find things, and you'll kind of bring those elements into your work. And then that becomes an ingredient of your work, I
yeah.
guess,
Yeah,
and
that's it. And I think it's good to go off on tangents and try
totally.
new things. And then you will naturally reject some of it. And the bits that work for you,
Yeah.
you will draw back. Um,
And it's
and
important to find the bits you don't like. You're like, very definitely, I don't like that. I'm impatient too. Sometimes I feel like such an imposter. I said the other day on a Zoom, I was like, I run this textile community, and yet I can't sew in a straight line. But it's okay, because that's not
yeah,
that's not what I do. That's not in my ingredient list, I suppose. You
yeah.
know, it's all this exploration and excitingness that I've sort of saw in your work. And I'm so grateful to you, Claire, for coming and talking to us. It's been
Wow.
amazing. Where can people find you?
Well, I think probably the easiest place for people to find me is on Instagram. So my Instagram is at Clare Schmidt Norris. And from there, there's also a link to my website. But really, Instagram is where they'll see my journey and all the things that we've been talking about today. So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you so much again for joining
Okay.
us.
Absolute pleasure. Good.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.